All right, is everyone ready? Yeah, I think we should start. 4:06 is the time. And with that, we will call to order here at the Central Administration Building, the Washoe County School District, the Education Alliance Board of Directors meetings for January 27th, 2025. So with that, 4:06, here we go. We'll go over to roll call for today. And it's a full house, huh?
Yeah. John Ardunco, I always say his name wrong. No, not present. Michelle Anderson.
Here.
Brian Bozema. Not present. Christine Brown Gallagher.
Here.
Melissa Dedman. Here. Kaylin Evans.
Here.
Lauren Rodriguez. Here. It's okay, I got you. Jabari Goodrich. Not here. Crystal Herrera Woodley. Not here. Victoria Mason. Not here. Landon Miller.
Present.
Chris Morgan. Not here. Manny Ortiz.
Here.
Ralph Rodriguez.
Here.
Julia Rogers is here. Dave Shintani.
Here.
David Taylor.
Here.
And Sarah Gobshill. Here.
I am here.
Oh, Chris.
Chris Morgan's here.
Perfect. He's here. We got you. That's enough for a quorum, I believe. Yeah, yeah. All right. Before we move on to all of our agenda items for today, we have a lot to go over. Any public comment? Brittany?
None at this time.
None at this time. We'd love to hear it. With that, we will move on to approval of the minutes from the, how about a welcome? Would you like to give a welcome? 201, welcome.
Yeah, I'd like to give just a quick welcome. So it's been 8 weeks since we met last. Today's agenda is action-packed. We will be hearing from Rochelle Murillo, who is an absolute expert here at the district, sharing about chronic absenteeism. We will go over where we landed for funding as it comes to evening of pure imagination. Just make a vote or an action towards dispersing those funds. We're going to share a little bit about the work that we are doing, and then we will be reviewing the Washoe Education Foundation merger plan as part of today's meeting as well, with ideally with the outcome of the recommendation of approving it to the Board of Trustees. So it's just very busy today, so I just want to let everyone know that's what we're doing. We really appreciate your time.
Cool. With that, we'll go to 202, approval of the minutes from the December 2nd, 2025 meeting of Education Alliance Board of Directors. So we'll need a motion, a second, and then a vote.
I can motion it.
All right. Julia with the motion, a second. Manny with the second. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. All right. 202, approval of the minutes from our last meeting has passed. With that, we'll go over to 203. That's a presentation and update on chronic absenteeism causes, identified solutions, and ongoing efforts right here from the Washoe County School District. So, Sarah, we'll turn it over to you to turn it over to Rochelle.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for your time coming today. And again, Rochelle Murillo is an absolute expert in terms of what's happening here in our school district. The woman oversees so much. Like when I first went to coffee with her and just got to hear of all the things that her team has to deal with. It is really amazing. And so I was really hoping that she could come and share today.
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that kind introduction. I'm going to give you a broad overview of chronic absenteeism and some of the efforts that our schools and our department are implementing this year around chronic absenteeism to reduce chronic absenteeism. I'm going to talk to you a little bit also about how we support schools through other areas that my department oversees. So I've been in the district for 23 years now. I oversee our programs that are serving our students that are homeless. I also oversee any of our supports for students in foster care. I oversee attendance also, and our family resource centers. I'll give you a little information about family resource centers today as well. Okay, go for it. You can go farther. Okay, so chronic absenteeism. This is something that we've been struggling with for a bit now. Started in 2020, where we really saw some large spikes for a variety of reasons. But I wanted to define for you what is chronic absenteeism. So, students, according to the federal definition, at any time that a student misses is considered an unexcused absence. Now, our Nevada law allows for two exemptions. And those are when we have a note from a medical doctor or a behavioral health professional exempting attendance. And that's exempting, it's not an excused absence. And then we have religious holiday exemptions too. And our Nevada revised statute allows for 5 of those within the school year. So defining chronic absenteeism, that's missing school or being absent 10% or more of the school year. So when you look at, because it's a percentage and when we're looking at points in time, remember it's a percentage of days that students are enrolled. So it fluctuates quite a bit depending on the day of the week and the time of year that we're looking at chronic absenteeism. Okay, so there are a variety of implications to when students miss school. Essentially, they're not in school. They're not in front of their teachers. They're not building those relationships with their peers, their teachers. And we see some consequences to that when students are chronically absent, especially in elementary school, but we see it going through middle and high school. So these are not surprising, but they're very concerning. So we see that students have 20% lower reading and math when they have when they're chronically absent. They're 2 times more likely to be retained in grades and twice more likely to be suspended by the end of grade 7 and more likely to drop out. So we see a cumulative effect. If students are chronically absent in elementary school, then they're going to struggle in middle school. They'll miss more school in middle school because they're struggling academically. And then they miss more in high school, so they're more likely to drop out and have very large gaps in their education. So this is very problematic for our students. There's nothing that replaces being in a classroom with their teacher, getting the best support that they can. Okay, so I wanted to give you some context in terms of in the last four years, what has it looked like? So nationally, we've fluctuated, right? And you see some of those same trends through Washoe County School or through Nevada as well. So last year in Nevada, 26%, if we round up, 26% chronically absent. And then we'll go forward real quick to see Washoe County. So these are some of our data right now in Washoe County. So at one point during the pandemic, we were up to 39% of our students were chronically absent. So those are very large numbers. For context, before the pandemic, we were somewhere around 12 to 13% of our students were chronically absent. So we saw really large increases in chronic absenteeism and students missing out. We continue to struggle with having kids come back. But schools are being incredibly innovative, and the work that they're doing, I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about today because we're seeing some pretty good reductions in chronic absenteeism. As of last week, we were at 19.7%. We've fluctuated this year between 19 to 22%. So we'll see how that lands at the end of the year when we have complete data for the entire year. This is our grade level, and I always find this really interesting to see. So you'll see that our kindergarten students are students that are fairly chronically absent. We see a dip in elementary school, and then we see things really tick up in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and our seniors are the most severely chronically absent grade level in our district. And we try to guess the reasons why, and sometimes if we look long term at the students and their history of chronic absenteeism, we see that those seniors that are severely chronically absent often missed many years of school or were chronically absent for many years. And so now we've got big academic gaps as they become seniors. And I just want to reference really quick, I'm going to talk a little bit about our middle school engagement program today, but I want you to really point your attention to 6th grade, where we see really large increases in chronic absenteeism at middle school. That can be a difficult transition for both students and families, and so we see those large increases, and that's why we've really focused on middle school as an area where we'd like to focus a lot of our intervention.
Michelle,
Yes.
are the 2 buckets there, the chronic absenteeism and the severely chronic, are they
Yeah.
mutually exclusive?
They are, so, no, this is not overlap. So I should explain, the light yellow are students that are approaching chronically absent, so they're about 7 to 9% chronically absent. The students that are in the dark yellow, they're between 10 and 19% chronically absent, and the red, which is considered severely chronically absent, that's 20% or higher. Okay, so we do have some celebrations. And as many years as I've been doing this work, it's been a year of just innovation and building relationships and doing some really incredible work with students. So we looked at how much time have we seen this year in terms of, we call it reclaiming instructional time. And that means students are in the classroom. Have we seen an increase in students being in the classroom? And this is what we've found so far. 42 of the 66 elementary schools have reclaimed instructional time. 15 of the 17 middle schools and 11 of the 13 middle schools. So every grade level and every special population, when we're looking at race and ethnicity, or special populations like students who receive special education services, our English learners, our students in transition, have all seen increases in instructional time. So this is a real celebration for us that we have students in classrooms more frequently than before.
Is this all this school year?
Yes.
24, 25?
Yeah, it is, yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry for the different format. I don't know why when I sent it over, it changed the formatting, so it's not consistent. But so one of the things that we're looking at are a lot of school-based interventions. So we look at things like modernizing attendance taking. So parents used to have to call in, wait for the voicemail, leave a message, letting the attendance secretary or the attendance clerk, if they have one, know the reasons why. And that could be difficult sometimes. So parents can use their Infinite Campus parent portal app now to report absences, so that we're better able to track the reasons why students are missing school. There's been a lot of positive reinforcement strategies, a lot of connectedness activities, mentoring and counseling programs, many family engagement initiatives that we're seeing across the district. Targeted academic and social emotional support, and culturally relevant interventions. And we're seeing a lot of the community step up and help support us in things where the school district needs that support from the community. So in terms of innovative ways to tackle transportation challenges, how do we increase access to before and after school programs for working parents who need to go to work early but have young children that maybe don't start elementary school until 9 o'clock. Increasing access to healthcare and other programs. So we are super excited about some of those collaborations, and some of you have been on those meetings also, and so we're hopeful that we'll continue to see some of that work in the community supporting our district efforts as well. Okay, so I wanted to give you a little sense of what are students saying around what engages them, what brings them back into school. These are high schoolers, and it's always really fun to listen to the student voice. So this is a quick little clip. And I'm sorry, the music is really intense, but we love it. Thank you, communications.
What can your school do to keep you engaged?
I think what would be more motivated to come to school is if we had like brain breaks.
Okay.
Because a student can't be in class for a whole hour, 2 hours just quiet and sitting down.
Learning life skills in the moment, like right now while we're in school, they can help me.
Finding something that's more relatable, it sounds like.
That'll help you in the real world.
Yeah.
Either a business class or something to teach us about taxes, on how to start our own business, or like real big moves that students should be taking or preparing for.
Financial literacy course would be like crazy good right now, because I'm only a junior, and right now if I had this course right now, I feel way more prepared than I would than having to do it senior year.
If we could have home ec, something like where you learn to do things that you need to know around your house or somewhere else, I don't know, just a life skills class.
Like a mechanics skill class, like how to change oil in your own car.
There you go. Exactly.
So from the student perspective, they're talking about relevancy and purpose, right? What brings them, what interests them. We're also seeing a lot of students really engage in student activities, athletics, clubs, which are something that are really, really important. There's another video that I should have chosen too. There's so many to do because communications is a great partner with us and they've done that work with us. But they talk about how just bringing the fun back to school and being able to do those athletics and those clubs and build those relationships with their peers is something that they're really looking forward to. So we are continuing these efforts. These are some of our efforts that we've done this year as well through my department and in collaboration with schools. A lot of schools have worked on attendance competitions. So they make it really visual where you can see graphs where which grade level is winning and how many students have improved their attendance and how many have perfect attendance. And so students are loving that. Duncan is an example of that, where they do a lot of that work. They recognize students. They call them out on the intercom and say, "Good job, Brittany, because you improved your attendance," or "Melissa, you had a perfect attendance last week." You know, just recognizing that students are in class. We have worked really hard on the middle school engagement project, and we're seeing some really great outcomes right now. And these are folks where we've got re-engagement specialists that are focused at the middle school level. They have a caseload of students that are chronically absent that they're working directly with, or they're working at connecting students to other people that the students feel connected to. It might be a teacher, it might be the custodian, it might be a coach that they're connected to. And they do something called check-in, check-out with students. So they're doing daily check-in, check-outs. How you doing? How are things going? How is math going for you? Do you need any extra support? They advocate for the students when they need any extra support as well. So those are some things that are going great. These folks also work at connecting students to some of these extracurriculars for them. So they do robotics clubs. One club had they were doing like succulents where they put these plants together. It's just really based on what the interest of the students are and what they like to do. So engaging students in these fun activities. And then they give them incentives. So we have gift cards where when we see improvements with students, they get a little incentive where they get recognized, they get the praise, and then they get a little incentive to recognize the hard work that they did during that time. So we're working within middle school engagement to do that, but we also are doing a research project with REL West Ed, and so they're looking at the effectiveness of our check-in, check-out. So we've developed a research-based intervention, so we'll be able to understand, does this work? Do we see any significant decreases in chronic absenteeism? We'll have 2 cohorts this year, this semester. We're in our 3rd week of our first cohort right now, so we're excited and we'll be able to share some of that data if we see those great things. And then just expanding, we've done a lot of expansion on trainings and supporting families. We've visited and trained 82 schools. We're established and have an attendance officer and a re-engagement specialist assigned to every school in the school district so that they can also be a resource for schools as well. And then we've worked a lot on modernizing our attendance taking procedures for families. I just want to ask if there's any questions around attendance before I move on. And then I feel like I'm going over time, so I'll try to be quick. Yes.
Thank you. What I may have missed it. What are your benchmarks for absenteeism? I guess across all public schools, private schools, systems of our size.
Yeah, so right now it's tough to know because we are so abnormal compared to what we used to be. So we were at 12 to 13% chronically absent. Now our chronic absenteeism is still very high compared to where we used to be, right? So some of our goals are reducing chronic absenteeism district-wide at least 3% each year. And so that's what we're really working towards right now. We're doing that right now. And we're hopeful that by the end of the school year, when we have complete data, we'll continue to see even larger decreases in chronic absenteeism.
So 0% is probably the ultimate goal, but is there...
Well, yeah, that's...
So is there a more realistic goal ultimately that the district would like to...
Well, so we would like to be pre-pandemic. It's never going to be 0 because kids they get ill, they get sick, things happen, right? And according to the federal definition of chronic absenteeism, every instance of attendance is an unexcused absence, regardless of the reason. It's only our Nevada law that allows a couple of exemptions, and so we'll never be at 0%, but we're hopeful to get back down to pre-pandemic.
And do you have profiles on the various types of students, like their income or language?
We do look at special populations, so we can look at special populations to see what's happening with chronic absenteeism. So for example, our students that are homeless, there are students that are the most severely chronically absent students in our district because their living situation is so transient. So we can look at those special populations and race and ethnicity. We can also look at grade level.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to tell the board, Rochelle has shared with us some really amazing research. So if you're ever interested and want to, do a deep dive on some of this, one of the things that I found to be really powerful is that, when doing sort of district to district comparison, how much a district is prioritizing this and working towards doing this makes such a huge difference, and so clearly our district is moving on that, but I can share any of the sort of pieces because it is something that is a national conundrum in some ways.
Yeah,
so
it is. Yeah. Okay, so the rest of my presentation, I want to talk to you a little bit about students that are particularly impacted by attendance because they are some of our most vulnerable and impacted students in our district. Our Children in Transition program is our program that serves students that are homeless. So we define that as children who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So we do have students that live on the streets, but that can also mean that they're living in shelters, domestic violence shelters, family shelters, or they could be living in weekly motels or couch surfing. This is something that we call couch surfing, where they're living with another family because of financial need. And so we qualify them as under Children in Transition. Again, they are our students that are the most severely chronically absent. So the way that we support our students are more intensive in terms of, do they have food? Do they have clothing? Can we help to access places for them to stay? So we're doing a lot of kind of what we call tier 3 or more intensive work with students in transition, as well as the school does as well, because they are impacted by their living situation. So we had 1,992 students in our district last year that were homeless. Over 250 of those students were living on the streets. So those are frequently are unaccompanied youth, so they've been displaced or they're not living with a legal guardian, and so they're literally living on the streets, or they are couch surfing with friends. Another way that we help support families is we do have families that are living in crisis. We serve on average, last year we served nearly 4,000 families within our family resource centers. They've been in our district for over 30 years. We are entirely grant funded. We have 5 locations co-located in schools. The staff there, are you able to play it? Yeah, go for it. Yeah. I don't know, you might have to turn down the volume. This is the one with the intense music, I think. But I wanted to give you a visual of what it looks like. So we have staff, all staff are bilingual within the family resource centers. We have if a family comes in, they're asking for food, they're asking for housing assistance, they're asking for clothing, educational supplies for their students. So they are truly in crisis when they're coming to us in the Family Resource Center. We are in Nevada Revised Statute, so it does mandate for us to serve any individual that lives in the county. So sometimes we're helping grandparents, but the vast majority of them are families living and attending in our school district. So these are our different family resource centers. We do a family needs assessment and we help support the acute needs. So we're going to make sure that a family has access to food. We'll give them a food box. But then we might help them apply for a SNAP application so they have more long-term access to food. We might have English classes in our centers. We co-locate a lot of services depending on the needs of that community that we're located in. We have mobile harvest that comes through Northern Nevada Food Bank, and they provide fresh fruits and vegetables, milk, eggs, those kinds of things for families. We do parenting programs. We partner with Step 2 to provide parenting programs. We also serve families who maybe have received a report to Human Services Agency or Child Protective Services, but they're not opening up an investigation, but they feel like the family would benefit from additional support. So we work really closely with families to help stabilize them. We can do Medicaid applications with them. We can help to support them if their power has been turned off. We have a partnership with NV Energy. So we do a lot of direct services, and then we have formalized partnerships with other agencies within our community, so that if we don't provide the direct resources at the center, we can refer out as a soft handoff. So those are family resource centers. And again, with students that are chronically absent, they sometimes are experiencing some of these things, living in crisis or living in transition. And so we utilize this as a whole child approach, where we're supporting families and children across everything. So
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Do you see the trendings post-pandemic immediately proportional to the increase in homeless population?
Yes.
Homeless students. So that's...
Yeah, well, that's interesting data, actually. We saw a decrease in students that were homeless in our actual identification, and we were really scratching our heads why. But families were displaced. So some of them left our county, some of them went other places, but we couldn't find a lot of students. They were not enrolled. We didn't get a records request from any other school districts. So to some extent, we don't know where families went. We are starting, as students are returning to school more frequently, our numbers are increasing. But COVID, we saw a decrease in those numbers. Similarly, with students in foster care, we saw a decrease in students in foster care because they weren't in schools. Frequently, the school district is the most often agency that refers or makes reports to Human Services Agency, and teachers were not seeing their students, so they were unable to make those reports when necessary. Then we saw a real big increase. So they saw over 800 students in foster care, and generally they see around 400 to 500 students in Washoe County. So we're back down to those numbers in Washoe County for foster care. Yeah.
Hey, sorry, real quick. It is, I'm sorry, does somebody else have it? Okay. It's kind of interrelated, and I think it's more so because I think it's important for the board to have an understanding, and maybe you could speak to it a bit. In the last legislative session, they made changes to what designated a, quote, at-risk student. They changed the criteria for that, and so they increased the funding that was going to each student, but they changed basically what determined to make a child deemed at risk. Could you just chat a little bit about that? And I know, just because I think it's just good for the larger context of how we as a district are kind of trying to target our at-risk students around these issues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can completely address the way that they define that at risk. Within our district, we do have a risk index that we utilize that you're probably familiar with, Kaylin, that we look at areas like whether a student has failed at least one core class, whether they've moved to one or more schools within the district, whether they've had one or more suspensions. So we're looking at aspects like that. The legislature, I'm not totally sure how they're defining at risk, but it is difficult, right? So when we're thinking about things like trauma or those kinds of things, they impact students differently. And it's hard when there's sort of a generalized at-risk definition, because sometimes students are we're unaware of some of the things that they're experiencing in home that could potentially make them at risk, but we're unaware of what is happening with them. So I don't know if that answers your question or goes totally around it, but.
No, that was good. I think I just wanted to bring it up too, because we're going into a legislative session and you guys all talk to folks. And I think something that we are really pushing from the association standpoint is having the legislature look very closely at their definition of at-risk, because they basically cut it in half last legislative session. So we had half as many kids in our district receiving what they call weighted funding, which is additional funding on top of what the per pupil is, and you might get that for at-risk or our EL students or our special education or GT. So I just think it's an important conversation, and it ties in very much to what we're talking about now.
Any other questions?
Yeah, two questions, but I think they're related. So one is, what can an organization like us, the Ed Alliance, do to help? And then, we often give money specifically to schools. Is, in your mind, if schools are receiving this funding and we're interested in helping reduce absenteeism, what's the biggest bang for the buck for individual schools?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. So thank you for allowing me to come here, and I appreciate you allowing me to come here so I can bring awareness to some of the students that, student populations that are really struggling with attendance, but then some of the work that schools are doing as well. I appreciate that. In terms, I did touch a little bit on community organizations. Schools are working so hard right now on attendance, and they're trying so many different things, and I think it's really time that we encourage the community to step up to help us build capacity around areas like I mentioned, before and after school programs. So that's an area where, as I understand it, Reno, the city of Reno, city of Sparks, provides a lot of the before and after school programs, but they've had difficulty hiring for those things. So building that workforce so they can increase access to before and after school programs is essential for working families. If you have an 8-year-old whose parent has to work at 6 a.m. because they work construction, that 8-year-old has to figure out how to get to school at 9 o'clock, and if you've had an 8-year-old, they're not always doing that on their own, right? So some of that community building around how do we better support our families, and then how do we support schools around chronic absenteeism from a community perspective. So how do we think about transportation differently? What about childcare and the access to childcare and the cost of childcare in our community when parents have to maybe they have a young child, but they have an elementary or a middle school child, and they're trying to figure out, how do I afford this childcare? Maybe I have to ask that middle school student to stay home and watch my younger child. So those are some of the things that are impacting our families that the community can maybe think about. How do we build capacity around supporting families and our school districts? So did I answer your question? Did I miss any? Okay.
That was my question too, but going back to Caitlin's question, has the definition with CIT changed in recent years?
No, it has not. It stayed the same. McKinney-Vento is our federal law around how to identify students and the rights that they have if they're considered homeless. It's been in law since 1987. Reagan was in office when that occurred. It has not changed in all that time. So what has changed, though, is that we used to include foster in that definition, and Every Student Succeeds Act asked us to separate the two. So now we do identify foster and homeless differently. We don't count them together, and we serve them differently, but they have similar rights and protections between those two designations.
Quick question. I know this you're the district, and I don't know if this was something coincidentally that was done or as an added program to kind of combat this. I know for middle school, 6th grade athletics was added again in the district.
Yeah.
So was that done as part of to combat this? And then if so, is there any early data that's showing that's kind of helping that grade level at least?
Yeah, I wish I had that data, and I can get that for you. But I have heard anecdotally that it has really improved, that students are accessing those athletics. They're excited about it. And so I've heard some really positive feedback. I don't have any definitive answers for you. And it is related, because we do know that 6th grade is where we see really large increases in chronic absenteeism. So the district was trying to figure out, how else do we engage our students? And that was one area that they really wanted to improve. So our board of trustees really were thoughtful around what they did around that. Yes.
Hi. Just wanted to say, so the entire board can hear, because obviously you mentioned communications. Our intervention department and Rochelle are fantastic. Just you can hear the passion in her voice. I can tell you she's out in the community, she's out in schools, she's meeting with different departments. As you can imagine, it's a heavy lift for our large district, and you're just doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
So
I
thank you so
appreciate
much for
Thank you.
coming here and educating all of us
Thank you. I
about
appreciate
where
that.
we're at.
Thank you.
I really second that. I feel like I've learned so much, and it's some of her stuff that we saw during the Evening of Pure Imagination during the video and those stories. So, and just in the board packet, I just included some of the social posts where sort of included some of the messaging around the things that we learned from Rochelle's team, just about how much a relationship makes a difference, or notifying parents and doing those sort of things. So just informing that. If there's not other questions, no.
Are we going to be able to hear the intense music?
I mean, it's actually kind of nice. But
after that hammer goes down, we will be having an intense movie. Yeah, totally. Dance party real quick.
Please reach out to me if you have any questions. If you'd like to come see a family resource center, I would love to come show you around a family resource center anytime you'd like. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank you.
We will move on to item 204 now, presentation and possible action to approve the distribution of proceeds from an Evening of Pure Imagination through the Education Alliance Caring for Classrooms initiative for middle school engagement, supplies, student engagement, and more. First, though, any disclosures from the board?
Thank you, President Miller. So I, Michelle Anderson, would like to disclose that I am currently employed by the Washoe County School District. However, I wish to make it clear that my employment with the district will not result in any financial gain, personal interest, or conflict of interest related to the matter before the board today. I have reviewed the relevant district policies, and while I'm confident that my vote would be free of any bias or personal financial interests, I am going to abstain from voting on this item out of an abundance of caution to ensure that there's not any perceived conflict.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. So I really thought it would be great to hear from Rochelle about why it's important to support these efforts right before we kind of talked about where we landed with Evening of Pure Imagination. So you'll remember the last meeting, which again was 8 weeks ago, but it feels like it was really fast because of all of the holidays. We really talked about the stats around an Evening of Pure Imagination, and this was really to bring back the financials to the board. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the finance review team because they really helped us put together this in a much more straightforward way. In particular, Chris Morgan works some magic. Sometimes when you're really close to a lot of spreadsheets, it causes sort of the beautiful mind effect. And so I was in there with this, with the sticky notes and he was like, how about linear? How from the top to the bottom? So with that, we're going to kind of review that. It's on page 11 in your packet if you're not seeing it. And I'm just going to walk you through some of the bigger pieces so that you can kind of see. And what we try to do is we try to do a year over year for the last 3 years of the event, just to give you an idea. So I want to point out that, and I put some notes in here first thing. Okay, so I wanted to show that if you look at the very top line sponsorships, that it is significantly lower than it was last year. And we really feel like this is on trend to what a lot of organizations saw. Corporate, in particular, seemed to have more money to be able to give in the 23-24 year. So that was really common to what other nonprofits saw, as they saw a little bit of boost from the corporate audience. But you can see it's not much lower than 2022-23. And it doesn't include the Microsoft Give, because that would have happened regardless of the event happening or not. And so we thought it was helpful to kind of pull that out so you can just see event proceeds. The next line that I wanted to kind of point out is the expenses. And we had talked about this, but you can see it's substantially more expensive this last year. And there's a number of factors for that. One, food had increased, right? Food and drink, as we all know, are a little bit more expensive. I know you can't really have a conversation out in this community without eggs coming up. And that was, sort of a precursor discussion in terms of what that meant to have the food and beverage at the event. Also, we had about 100 more people in attendance. So that's going to naturally just make it cost more because we had more people in the room. We also hired a photographer, and so that was an additional cost, and we decided to promote the event on social media to bring awareness, and all of these things added to the cost. So I just wanted to let people know why it looks like it jumped so much. And then we have the administrative fee, so that's just taking off the 8% like we have done in the past. Want you guys to be able to see, but you can really see what, sort of what the net amount was for the event this year. Then secondarily, there was a spreadsheet that we used in the past that was just a little bit more confusing that kind of showed this. As you guys know, not everybody supported EA was interested in being part of the event. So one of the things that Brittany and I did in particular is we really tried to hustle and get out there and tell as many people as we knew, that were either connected to Education Alliance. There was a few, I think we shared this last month, but there was about 20% new donors, that were giving at some level. But a lot of what we were doing is really trying to write proposals, like get out there, ask for a little bit more relative to a sponsorship, and you can see just kind of where we landed there in terms of the corporate donations. That also doesn't. That it also includes the work and that Microsoft did also to help us, and so you see all of that coming in at the $57,000, and then we have we have a couple of other pledges that we found out are coming in January, and so we have that projected. So you can see that's how much we were able to raise that wasn't directly connected to the event. I also think it's important that this audience knows that even of our sponsorship groups, like if it's a foundation or like a corporate foundation, we were still writing proposals for about 40,000 of that 101. So it does bring up the question to me of whether or not the funding would still happen if we didn't do the event, but that was something that felt like a change. In the past, I think sort of the philanthropic trends have been that, sponsorship is a sponsorship for an event. You don't necessarily also have to bring back data or do a proposal, and we saw there was a difference of that this year. And then the last piece that I wanted to point out was the individual donors. So you may remember me saying in the last meeting, hey, let's wait till the end of year appeal comes in because we're going to make a ton of money. Well, we didn't make as much in terms of the I'm Here specifically earmarked for chronic absenteeism, but that does not show everything we brought in December. So you should know we did have a number of our regular individual donors and people who are interested in supporting. They just weren't interested in supporting chronic absenteeism. And there's been a number of you that I've had this conversation. It is a little bit of it's not a sexy sell, if you would, chronic absenteeism, I think, is like one of those big systematic issues that's out there that we know, but maybe isn't the same thing as like, look at this kindergarten and what we can do, when it's that personal ask, or if, other foundations that are out there and they're doing things. And so that may be a factor in terms of, at the event, donor events or our end of year, but we still believe we're building a lot of really important awareness, and the work that we continue to go, we will start to see return on that effort. But I just wanted to point that out so that everyone could kind of see. And then at the very end, you're going to see the total net for the Caring for Classrooms at $161,000. So that's the recommendation I have for the board today, is that we make decide to disperse that over to Washoe County School District to support chronic absenteeism and the efforts that they're doing around middle school. And you can kind of see historically how that compares. Initially, I was like, oh, darn. We ran around so much this year, and I really wanted to raise more money, and I was really bummed because I didn't think that was the case. And then I started to look at, oh, right, that doesn't count all the other money that maybe directly went to schools, or we felt like was so small it wasn't worth putting in this pool. Like we did a couple of things where we had donors give us specifically for gift cards, and so we got gift cards out for things like positive behavior incentives. So that is where we land right now. So again, I just want to say that because I know you guys are going to have to vote on it. My recommendation to the board is that we disperse $161,502 to Washoe County School District, along with $6,995 for the administrative fee. So both of that would go over to the district. And that's how we've done it historically. But yeah, so.
What is the administration, what is that administrative fee?
The administrative fee is, so you guys may remember in December, we had a secretary. She gave notice, and so she's no longer with the organization, but she's only part-time, and so we pay a delta of her salary to bring her up so that she has benefits, or he, I guess, going forward. But so that is money that would go towards that amount. Yeah.
So my question is how is this different than what we have done in the past? When we distribute $161,000 plus $6,995, how is this vote anything different than what we have historically done with this money?
Yes.
What are we doing and why are we doing it?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest difference, if you guys remember last year, this board voted for $164,000 to be distributed directly to schools. We gave each school $1,000, except for ones that had 15% or less free and reduced lunch populations, and we gave them the option to give the money to a school that was in need. And we did have some schools do that. We had about 5. All of that got distributed right to schools to be able to do this. With this one, what we are doing is we are giving it over to the chronic absenteeism issues or efforts that are happening designated at schools, but it may include things like personnel or teacher stipends or the supplies they need for activities. So it's not going necessarily to each school. And that, I think, is the biggest difference. We really tried to focus in particular, the middle school audience, because when I joined, I asked I asked the same question Chris did, where can we make the biggest impact? If we know we only bring, this much to the table, where can we help and where would be the biggest priority? And this is the direction I was given.
So I have a question. I guess because we're giving this big pool of money into a bigger pool, how do we know the impact of the funds that we're specifically giving, and how do we report that back to our?
Yeah, so that's a really important part. And one of the things that I want to underscore here, is about really the donor fidelity here. So of this money, like I've been in communication with some of the folks who will be working to, whether or not it's, doing clubs at certain schools or, which of the schools are the most, but there's 10,000 of here that I know can only go towards supplies. So that's something I'm working directly with the district to make sure that will only go towards supplies. Like we are trying to do our best so that we can be like, these are the different schools. This is the money we've put in. What does it look like? So that we're bringing that information and that impact back to each of our donors, because I think it's really important. Yeah.
And Sarah, can you speak to the methodology behind the fund disbursement as well?
Definitely. So Rochelle kind of touched on this a little bit, but they have identified 14 of our 17 middle schools who really need support. And there's a couple of different methods that they're going about it. Some of those schools have communities in schools already, so they have a designated person who's there. Some of them need additional staffing, which they call an engagement specialist. So like putting somebody there whose job it is to really make sure that there are fun, really great ways that these students can be engaged, but also they're kind of the point person to watch, kids that could be missing, like, this kid, because one of the things that I have heard as we're going to schools again and again is that teachers love their job. They just wish there was more of them. Like it's really hard to build the relationships and to do those sort of pieces. So of the schools in the highest need, they just have a priority list of, and it's factors like what's their chronic absenteeism rate? What's the free and reduced lunch population rate at the school? What are the resources that are there that can be used? What are the ones where you feel like that there's a gap? And so that's why there is 14 of 17 that are more of the focus, because there's a couple of middle schools that are like, we're doing okay here.
So will we know specifically like the money from here funded ABC, or is it more like these are the overarching efforts of the district with this initiative, and this is what we helped fund, but does that make sense? Like where we can kind of like kind of key in and say, over at O'Brien Middle School, the funds from this organization funded these specific activities and materials for this school, and they funded these specific, materials. That way, when we're talking to folks, we can bring it back to more specifics when we're trying to get more donors in the future.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but I do really want to come back to what is our impact, so people feel very comfortable being like, yes, this is where we are. What I would say at this stage, where we are with planning, is this is a chunk of what I think is probably like a $2 million gap in terms of what's really needed. And we want to continue to help with those sort of with those pieces, with building awareness and helping to bring in funds and resources as it makes sense. And so I would say what I'd like to do is exactly what you said. Here's how this chunk of funding has been used at these schools. I don't see why there would be any reason why we couldn't get that information, because we're working with the directors who have earmarked these schools. Yeah. No worries.
Yeah, my next
It's
question
good
was going to
questions.
be who ultimately is determining, because I know we have a list of priorities.
Mhm.
Are like who's determining ultimately how money is being spent? Like how this money is being spent.
Totally. That's a good, it is, I would say it's a collaboration between Dr. Lamarca and the grants department. I know that, as they're working in finding out, because if the grants department, writes a giant grant and they get federal funding that could help a number of schools, like, okay, so maybe we don't necessarily need that. Like, that's why this plan is a little bit, as we go right now, I'm like, oh, going forward, I want to be able to bring that information back. But there will probably be a few things that change in the next couple of months, would be my guess, as more funding comes in. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Because I want to be very transparent with where the money's going. And if you are like, I want these specific questions, like, I'm going to work to bring it back. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of a long-term strategy. By giving a little bit to a bunch of schools, we may not see the bigger impact, but if we gave bigger chunks to a smaller number of schools, and we could point to this directly to our donors, like, hey, this was a pilot we ran in these schools.
Yeah.
Look what it did. It decreased absenteeism by 5% or something, or whatever. Look what your money can do. Is that an approach we, think about? Kind of a longer game kind of thing than just putting a smaller amount of money, a Band-Aid on something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that Brittany and I have been working on, well, we're doing some other things too, but really is trying to collect the stories of impact, because you guys have all been here for a long time. So those stories exist, but I don't think we have done the best job of like capturing those. So whether or not that is, to your point, like a $10,000, gift or a grant to support a title eligible but underserved, what did they do with this, right? Or the laptop drive that happened during the pandemic. Like, there are things that really came out of that, and I think that has been an area probably of growth of the organization. It's a little bit because of capacity, but to your point going forward, absolutely. We want to be able to be like, we're asking for your support. This is where we think it's going to have those improvements, and then share out that data as we have it.
I was kind of asking, we're talking about 10,000 for smaller schools. If we did a bigger amount of money to 3 schools or 2 schools, where we think you could show an impact directly from what those funds are doing, I'm just wondering, it'd be easier to get more funds in the future for people, because success builds on success, right?
That's a good point.
I know everybody needs some, but I'm just wondering if you were looking at the kind of a longer game approach. I know that's maybe not what we're going to do, but I'm just going to.
Yeah, no. I totally hear what you're saying. I think what I've been trying to do is really work in best with the experts as I can, right? Like, I really see my role is helping to bring in awareness, steward in funds, try to do those sort of things, but allow for the flexibility that needs to happen until at which point it's like, okay, it's go time. This is exactly where the funds will be used. And a lot of that it will happen as we're going into the next academic year, when they're figuring out the staffing. What do those things look like? We will be giving some gifts directly to middle schools within the next couple of months, but to answer your question, Dave, I wouldn't know what that priority shift, to your point, for us to be able to vote like, hey, only these 3 middle schools versus 14 at this level.
And I think that's my question is, do we have the ability to disperse these funds in a restricted manner, and perhaps to develop those, to work with the district to develop those parameters so that we can track the efficacy of the investment more with a little bit more precision.
Well, and I can bring this group the budget that we're working on, but that's why it says very specifically in the action item, what are the different pieces that we would be supporting. So middle school engagement, it could be supplies for activities. It could be things like teacher stipends. So sometimes teachers are the ones who will do a student-led club. So we've talked to some middle schools that are like, well, we don't exactly have funding for that. So it might be something like that. It might be things like, transportation if this club decides they want to do a field trip. We try to keep it as specific to what has been identified in the group. So that's how we have put out our proposals to anybody we've been fundraising from. Yeah.
So first, Rochelle, thank you so much for all the data that you presented. I think it's critical to have that just by elementary, middle school, high school, because I think part of a larger issue of absenteeism is that the general awareness and education. If you are not tied to the district, if you do not have children in the district, if you don't have family in the district or work, you don't understand absenteeism outside of, oh, kids aren't going to school, what else is new? So I think for this group, at least for me, I have conversations all the time where I'm like, where do we make that impact both here and then also in the data? And so if the goal is 3%, of reduction, how can we impact that? And then if we look at the numbers, like how are our contributions going towards that 3%? And that, when I think of a former company I worked for, where I oversaw philanthropic obligations, if you will, that would be something where it's like, okay, we know that our donation contributed to this percent reduction in absenteeism. So I think if we can tie what we do into that somehow, or how we can continue working, with you and the school district and communications and things like that, I think that might help. First of all, the perception of where our money raised is going, and then also help people understand what that is too, because I feel like absenteeism is such a broad thing where it's like it's hard to pinpoint. But I go back to the Evening of Pure Imagination where trustee Beth Smith, my brain, she told the story about the child that literally couldn't go to school because they didn't have shoes to wear. And like, that's something you don't think about with absenteeism. That's like a human right, or it should be, right? So I think that when we think of where money goes to all that, I think at the end of the day, tying it to the district and the percentage and what makes sense, might be able to quantify that a little bit more of like, this is where it's going. Panasonic, this is where your money went to. Like something like that. How we do it, got no clue. But
It's
something
about the
like that.
bottom line.
Exactly.
It's about the
Yeah.
percentage reduction. That's what we're aiming for.
What would be the impact if we waited on this a bit, Sarah? So, just what I'm hearing from everybody else, and we've been, I don't know, spoiled, but the way we've done this forever is we've known very clearly, we made this much money, this amount is going to this school, this amount is going to this school, and I think we've all been very comfortable with that. I think we're all in on helping reduce absenteeism, but I wonder whether it might help us if we would just know before we just make the vote, like, we're spending over 160 grand. We think that the biggest bang would go 30 grand to this school, or maybe it's 50 grand to the district very specifically to do this specific thing. But I think I'm just feeling like we're all a little bit like 160, and you'll tell us later about where it went and how it impacted. So I don't, but we're waiting another month to do that if we do it.
But yeah, we'd be waiting to the end of April. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
In
you can
March.
go ahead and-
Yeah,
Well,
I was just gonna say if we're
and then I'll
waiting,
jump in.
yeah, till later in April. But that's a really interesting question. Like I don't know. I would imagine we would just figure out kind of trying to figure out, I mean, there's a certain amount of, yes, logistics, but to me, I think it's most important that, things are in hand for folks by June when they're really making these staffing pieces. That's what I would guess right now. By the beginning of the fiscal year. Yes, that's right. And so we would probably, the latest date we could probably vote on it is April would be my guess. But I would want to just, verify that in the event we had to, schedule a meeting in February or an earlier meeting or something. Kaylin.
Well, it's kind of two parts, and I think maybe part of a larger conversation that, I know we've talked and the board's talked around, is the push for chronic absenteeism, is it the right messaging going forward, right? And I think there's some good discussions we need to have on that. But in terms of the immediate, and kind of to piggyback on what was said, I think for me it would be great if the district were able to come, or schools were able to come tangibly and kind of say, hey, this is what we need this money for, right? Like, we're looking at using this money in this way specifically. And then that way we're able to tie it back specifically to an action. And I think centered around, there's so many areas that can address chronic absenteeism. But I know when we talk a lot about the need for, someone brought up, expanding sixth grade. Well, something to keep in mind is, like, at O'Brien, for example, they had, I want to say 65 people try out for the basketball team, and there were 30 spots available. So what do you do with the other 35 kids who are no longer playing basketball? Those kids don't have, and so, as an associate, we've been really trying to push extracurriculars, intramurals, clubs, activities, things that are very tangible. So I think, maybe if we were able to wait dispersing the money, and we could provide kind of more of a clear, understanding of these are the activities or clubs or programs or initiatives or staffing or, supplies that they need, and almost coming back to the board to say, hey, based on the needs, deferring to the experts are telling us, hey, these are the schools, they really need these areas specific, these are a generalized cost amount for the funds, and then as the board, you kind of approve it as a package. I don't know if that makes sense.
For sure, I'm down to be able to, bring back the information that we need. The only piece where I'm like, oh my gosh, because I want to do the best I can to give you guys the information you need. And I also want to be out in the community asking. And this is where I'm just having, I feel like just that challenge of capacity where I'm just like, oh, I want to give you all the data that you can do and, all the pieces, and also make sure we're inviting people in. Do you think in that case, because this is the other piece, is I don't want to necessarily put any schools, make it negative, or I always think about the perception, right, about coming in and doing those, but am I hearing you correctly? And you'd love to know sort of school by school, where are these pieces, the big needs, where are they looking to add additional staffing? Where is it that they're looking to use this money specifically for supplies? Where is it that, am I hearing that right in terms of just bringing a budget so you can kind of see
Sure,
fully?
Not to speak for everybody, I think just for me, it's not like a line item, it's not like every single pencil needs to be accounted for. But I think, again, Dave brought up a good point. You're putting a chunk of money, a sizable chunk of money from us into a larger chunk of money.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden it's kind of part of this big fund that we don't really know where it's going and how it's tangibly impacting it. And I think
even if it's restricted for middle school engagement, right? Because that still feels too nebulous. I just want to make sure. Okay, perfect.
And we could kind of take an impact on a vertical, for instance, if we decide to restrict our funds, just to resource teacher salaries, for instance, and track the efficacy, the impact of, funding those particular positions at X amount of schools, and what that did to the overall percentage decrease in chronic absence. That's just one example of a vertical we could choose.
Right.
It could also be, extracurricular programs. Our money is going toward extracurricular programs at these schools, and let's see what the engagement and impact look like just in that slice of the pie.
Well, I think based on what you and Kaylin are saying, and Kaylin, I want to make sure I didn't cut you off, just making sure that we come back with really the middle school, because what we're talking about is the middle school engagement budget that we put together, right? Like we are putting this out, and as we're doing more and more work to give an idea, it does move a little bit. It's a little bit of a moving target, but at very least you guys would see that. And I can even follow up with that after the board meeting, between now and April, so that you guys can get an idea of really where we're putting these funds.
I have, one thing I'm kind of wondering about is, we asked you if you had data to show that what you're planning is working, and we don't have that yet, right? We don't know you have some idea, but I guess, so you do have some data. Because I'm just thinking that would, if we're gonna be, if we don't know for sure what's working,
So the data that we don't have yet is the check-in, check-out pilot that we're in the middle of, but we do have data around middle school engagement and the students that we're working with. So we can summarize by school or by the middle school engagement as a whole, the effectiveness of chronic absenteeism. We can also look at academics. Did we see reductions in suspensions? Do we see how many students are taking advantage of the extracurriculars there that are chronically absent? We could look at it a variety of ways depending on sort of what the priorities of you all would be. So there's a variety of ways for us to look at it, but we do have data that I don't know it off the top of my head, but they have shown reductions in chronic absenteeism. So they typically have a caseload, and then they're also working with other staff as well that are providing support to students.
and though you could tie it to a specific activity or just
We
overall
could,
engagement.
we could. We haven't done that one yet. Yeah, we haven't done that one
Uh-huh.
yet, but we could report out on how many students that we're working with within the middle school engagement that we've identified are accessing the extracurriculars, how many are seeing improvements in academics, how many are seeing reductions in chronic absenteeism. We could do that. Yeah.
And I have one more question, kind
Yeah,
of, because
sure.
Part of the district funding comes from attendance, right? Is that true, or is that not true? I mean, I thought some districts
So it is,
enrollment,
it's
not attendance.
It's per pupil funding. So we do something like it's called a count day. So when students are in the seat during that day, they get per pupil funding, but they do several times a year now. They used to do one day, but so we get partial funding when students are in classroom during the times that they're
and this
monitoring.
should positively impact all that count day, right?
It could potentially, yeah. It's enrollment and attendance on those days, yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Manny, I saw you did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had a question because I heard you, Rochelle, you mentioned the after-school programs, and I know we're talking about extracurriculars, and I know this year, the city of Spark, city of Reno have picked up some of the after-school programs, but in the past, Team Up through Title I has also had after-school programs, and I heard this year that funding was cut
That is my
for the middle school
understanding.
level, right? And so I guess as we're talking about where can we put our money, or this money that was raised, Team Up, the after school programs, that's not funded, that's not set up by the schools, right? On their budget lines, right? That's a whole different department.
As I understand it, I'm not super familiar with Team Up funding, but I have heard that it was cut. So, and I understand Team Up provides academic support. It provides before or after school programming, those kinds of things. So it's a little bit more intensive than like just a typical before or after school program.
Correct. And so I guess just for the board, just something to keep in mind, that is there even that potential for partnering with Team Up or these sites to bring back some of the middle school, after school, before school programs where they do focus such as STEM, civics, character ed, physical activities. So
Well, and I just want to underscore, like, I want to be able to give you guys the information that so you feel comfortable with this decision. At the end of the day, we have stayed and really articulated it that it is the middle school engagement, so those are the pieces. So anyone that we have written proposals to or done those sort of things, that is the lane in which we're staying in. But if it would be really helpful, like you're suggesting, that I follow up and, give you an idea of like, well, what does that look like at all the different school levels and what are some of the metrics for outcome? I think that we could definitely do that. And if we need to, we can postpone this vote till April.
Yeah, and I think too, I'll just kind of weigh in on a couple of different things here. I think first, it's kind of important for all of us to realize, at least for me, is that we're so used to giving to schools, but in this effort, we're kind of, under at least my understanding, is kind of like giving to specific tactics to combat the issue, as opposed to saying, here, school, take this much money and away we go. I think just based on some of the feedback that we're getting today, maybe some of these tactics are not as defined as we would like them to be. I mean, Rochelle, in theory, what can $160,000 from Education Alliance do and for middle school engagement? You can answer that or not, but I think that might be something that could be valuable to a lot of us here if we've identified a couple of really strategic approaches here. And I think a lot of us might feel better, distributing the money to the school district that way with a little bit more specifics, maybe. And then I don't know. I'll let you go to the 160, and then I have one more follow up.
Sure. So as you were talking about, Manny, those after school programs. So as it is right now, our middle school engagement, they do provide stipends for teachers who do some of that programming after school. Sometimes they do it before school. So there has been some extracurricular activities and programming that teachers run before school, like at Cold Springs, where at one point they had over 60 students participating in that program. So it can provide the funding for teachers to be able to provide the robotics club, the whatever club, the athletics that they want to provide in the afternoon. It can also provide funding for staff who will implement some of the programming around middle school engagement. So the coordinating the check-in, check-out, and connecting students to mentors, or connecting students to some of these extracurricular activities or those kinds of things. So it could potentially be around staffing that would coordinate some of these efforts at a school level. So maybe just at O'Brien, they're coordinating some of these efforts there.
No, and I think that's cool, because like when we talk about middle school engagement, it's this very broad topic where we're like, what do you do with it? But to hear that, I think that there's a lot of specifics that can go a long way, and then it can follow up with our donors and say, this is what we were able to do specifically, and it doesn't just go to, we gave this much money to this school and that's that. Like, I think maybe that's something that we should start thinking in those terms. And another thing too, I mean, I know you guys brought up a lot of things about data, but my understanding too is that we have an entire data team at the school district that we have as a resource, right, Sarah? Like, and they can give us some of these numbers that we can then take to donors.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like after hearing this, just really from the board's perspective, I'm like, yep, let us take some time. We'll build out, because I feel like I have a budget that I've been building towards and like trying to share. Here are the pieces that we are fundraising for. But I realize, like, without you guys seeing that, or maybe without me sharing that, that's created a sort of a level of confusion or feeling vague. And some of this, as we started out of the gate, we were learning as we were going. I feel much more comfortable with like, no, this is what we're supporting. And this is why we're supporting it, because again, it has been prioritized as a way that has been impactful for these students. And that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that when we are telling people we want to help people, that we're helping people.
I love Dave's thought about getting the metrics here. I would say, like, if we can get that, it'd be great. I'm not sure that's what's absolutely necessary. We built a playground a couple years ago. We didn't get data on like how many more kids were joyously going to school. So I think just knowing what these programs are is sometimes enough. If we can get the data, even better. I think, Rochelle, the question to you is hearing what we're saying. Is that a fair ask of you and your
absolutely.
team?
We already have it.
Okay.
So we can provide that.
Well, not just the data. I mean, like, asking you to say 160 grand, kind of tell us where it's going to go.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Awesome.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we could definitely do that, can provide the data. We could bring a middle school engagement staff to come talk to you about what's a day in the life and what do they do. And we could have teachers, if they're able to come. I can't guarantee, because I can't think of anybody right now, but we could do middle school engagement and they can come talk about the clubs and the experiences that they're having and the interactions and those kinds of things. So,
and sorry, I know we've been talking, and I think just for me, it's not as much a concern that the money isn't going to be taken and done the right way. So I
Oh
want to
yeah,
be
no,
very
I
clear.
totally,
I hope that's
I
not
understand.
coming on that.
Oh no, I'm not. I
Okay.
totally understand. You just want some clarity on
Well, and I
what's.
think it's because it's all about communications, right? It's all about marketing it. And when I can take a picture of a group of kids who are engaged in a Lego robotics club, and I can take a photo of these kids and I can tell a story about the kid who never came to school. And the one reason that he came to school is because every morning he had this middle school engagement specialist who was doing a club with him. And then you write the narrative around the child, right? You write the narrative around those kids. That's what we market to donors. So that's kind of where I'm thinking of is the tangible piece is more about how we market it in the future versus any sort of like concerns that it's not going to be used well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, no, completely understand. And I do understand the need to just better understand how effective is this? What are you doing with it? What does it look like? I completely understand. So yeah.
I really appreciate this conversation. It's so helpful for us as we continue to go forward. I had one clarifying question, and that's of this 160 that we have said we are giving over. We have a couple of donors that in particular we're looking at doing sort of, hey, let's celebrate the work that you're doing. So I don't know if it's best if I should just pull that out so that we can, to your, just so that you guys are making the decisions on these funds that haven't been earmarked for the middle school engagement program, but in particular, there's 2 that we're looking to do this first quarter, which means if we initially, I was thinking we would disperse the funds today, and so then we would start telling that story about how the community is really excited and putting their efforts towards chronic absenteeism as a way to kind of build more momentum towards more fundraising. But given what everyone said today, and I completely agree, we'll come back in April with the information that you need. But thinking about a couple of gifts and celebrations that we'll be doing in between, that will impact these numbers, if that makes sense. So it means that we have proposals that we've written to specific funders that we will be talking about how they will be helping contribute, which we would pull out of this because it is already restricted for the middle school efforts.
Do you want to do like a special session? Or, I mean, do we, I don't know that we feel like a need to wait to April if we have the data before then, even if even if it's like 20 minutes or half an hour for us to get together virtually.
I think that could be great because I would love, in my mind, and I could be wrong, but when you're working with a large budget, sometimes it's really nice to know what you have secured so you can start to plan accordingly. And my biggest fear is that you have somebody that like, oh my gosh, the position can't be extended because we don't make these decisions or something else happens. But if we could do something maybe February, maybe we do it virtual, I could work to try to get as much information as possible back to this group. So that we could make that decision. I would also have to double check with our boardroom and the calendar. So I would have to let you guys know by email. But yeah.
Well, and I also think too, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I also don't want us to impact your ability to fundraise like now, right? Because I kind of hear that. It's like, if we get this money going, then you're able, it's okay. Like we also, in trying to make sure it's used the right way, we don't want to then kind of shoot us and be like, down the road, like, oh man, we waited so long because of the holdup with the funds?
Yeah, no, I can hear you want clarity of where it's going to go so you can be able to share people. I really am looking, as you guys know, I'm moving pretty fast and I'm looking like I'm excited for EA's board to take the charge, right? To be like, heck yeah, we saw that this was an issue as we continue. We know WEF also has contributed to chronic absenteeism. So I was just thinking about those type of pieces. But again, I want to be respectful to your perspective as board of directors, right? Like it's really important. And sometimes when you're close to the work, you're just close to the work. Right. And so part of what I've been doing is just let's make sure I feel like we know what we're doing. We can say we're moving forward with this so then I can invite other people in to also help and inviting people, asking them to support us, right? That fundraising piece. So I really appreciate that, Kaylin, that recognition.
So I guess the direction at this point is that there will be no action for item 204 today, and then we'll just be on standby for possibly something between now and March 30th or 31st, potentially?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and there was a small edit on our board agenda. Our next board meeting is April 21st.
Oh, April 21st.
Yes.
Not March 31st.
It's not March 31st. That's the day after spring break, and I was just really worried that was going to impact attendance in this location, and so that was it's the later date. So for sure, we would have a meeting virtually, probably in between now and then. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
And then it would still be just a regular public meeting with all of the agendas posted and.
I'm just joking. It will be in person
Okay.
because online does not seem like that's going to be an available venue for us at this juncture.
Oh, we have to have the ability for public comment.
Yeah, we want to
So-
make sure, again, this is
Okay.
what we're trying to do, keep things as transparent as possible.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So with that, then 204 is wrapped up. So stand by for that as we move on. And we'll go to 205, presentation, discussion, and update on Washoe County School District Principal for a Day events. Presentation only. Presentation and discussion only.
Yes, I'm going to go through these next two pretty quickly, only in interest of the fact that we have the Washoe Education Foundation merger as well down on the agenda. But I just wanted to let everyone know that a Principal for a Day is being delayed this year. I'm super bummed. We had thought that we were going to have it on the 13th of February. I don't know how many people have already purchased their tickets for EDON's State of the Economy, but there was no way we were going to go head to head for that. And that was a date that worked for the superintendent, and it's really hard to find another date before we get into testing and those sort of things. And so I just think the best course of action is to have it next February. So we are right now still moving forward with the planning for the event in 2026. We still need a venue and food connections, and I know that there were several board members who had offered that. If we can continue going forward with that, I'd really like to see that event, maybe in a casino, a little bit bigger, and be able to make a bigger splash with that one, because I just think it's a really important event where people learn a lot. But that's the update for Principal for a Day.
All right. Any questions on that one? Up next, update on Education Alliance Partners and Education Program Improvement Research. This is item 206.
Yep. And same thing, we just really wanted to keep it on your radar so that you feel like you know what's going on with Education Alliance. But we are working to streamline the work that we are doing with Partners with Education, and working in conjunction with CTE as well to identify some of the workforce development programs that are serving secondary students, as well as higher needs, like what are identified higher needs for a wider K-8 audience. So we will keep you abreast of those changes. Many of you who are representing organizations, if you're on the board, or you've been a partner in education in the past, we are starting to reach out and schedule those meetings to talk. We have a series of questions, which we talked about the last time we met. We're talking about things that we feel like could be really beneficial as we go forward with those, and so we're scheduling those. So if you haven't heard from us yet, assume that you will. But that's what we're working on with Partners in Education.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll go to 207. This is presentation, discussion, and possible action to provide a recommendation to the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees regarding the possible merger of Washoe K-12 Education Foundation and into the Education Alliance of Washoe County Incorporated, and the filings of merger with the Nevada Secretary of State. Before that, any disclosures?
Thank you. I, Michelle Anderson, would like to disclose that, again, I am currently employed by the Washoe County School District. However, I wish to make it clear that my employment with the district will not result in any financial gain, personal interest, or conflict of interest related to the matter before the board today. I've reviewed relevant policies, and I'm confident that my participation in the discussion and my vote on this item will be free from any bias or personal financial interest. Additionally, as this item would be brought forward to the WCSD Board of Trustees for the final vote, I will be able to move forward with participating in the discussion and voting on this item. Thanks.
Sarah, I probably should have talked to you ahead of time, but I should probably abstain as well.
Yeah, I think that makes,
Okay.
I think that's a good idea. Well,
You would still be able to vote. You could just make the disclosure just like I did that you're an employee, but since the Board of Trustees is going to be making the final decision, you are good to.
But I was also an employee of WEF.
Oh, gotcha. There you go.
So I'm going to abstain.
Yeah, that sounds great. Again, one of the things that about this motion, we are making the approval or to recommend or not recommend the merger of the organizations. So I said the last meeting we were going to do this early 2025, and here we are 8 weeks later. Man, this is the fastest thing that has happened to me since I joined this organization, I think, just how quickly this went from like, let's talk about it. No, let's do it. Actually, it's okay. Let's do it. So in this packet, and I sent it out ahead of time as well, there is the merger plan that Washoe Education Foundation has approved, their board has approved, that kind of outlines what will happen if we go forward with becoming one organization, which is, of course, my recommendation. I think that there's a lot of really wonderful things for Education Alliance to gain, and there really isn't a lot of risk in terms of this merger. You can see it's all lined out. I did want to assure you guys that I reached out to our accountant just to make sure there wasn't, some tax implications I wasn't seeing, and he said, nope, everything looks great, just to, of course, make sure to file 990s for the respective organizations. But with that, I just wanted to make sure, were there any questions or comments or anything regarding this plan? And then, of course, we have Tyler Rogers in the audience here from the Washoe Education Foundation who can answer any questions as well. Did you guys use all your questions previously? No, I'm teasing, but.
No, sir, I'll say I feel like this is something that we've discussed for a while now. It seems very much researched and vetted with both organizations, so I have confidence moving forward with your recommendation.
Sarah, I'm curious if you don't mind just talking about the process. So we know this is going to go before Board of Trustees,
Yep.
if and after we approve this recommendation. Then what happens next?
Yep.
Practically, as an organization, and what does it look like to merge the two entities on an operational standpoint, aside from a legal standpoint?
Yeah, so just to give everyone the full clarity of what I know about this merger is that after tonight, if you approve it to go to the Board of Trustees, it then goes into their hands to make the decision whether or not the organizations could merge. If that happens, then Washoe County School District's legal counsel will file the new merger paperwork with the Secretary of State. And as the merger plan says, we will go forward, Education Alliance will go forward with our current bylaws and sort of business as usual, keeping in mind that then we will be able to use the resources that we are getting from Washoe Education Foundation. And so when I say resources, they have carefully stewarded, like we have for a decade, certain fans, people who really love public education. And so it gives us an opportunity to invite those people into the work we're doing. And after the work that I'll be doing in February for you guys around the specificity around chronic absenteeism, we'll be able to also invite them into, hey, with a donation, this is what you could be doing. So really in terms of the operations, I see it as a space where we can come together and unify that public education is important. And Education Alliance would love to be the place to be able to help steward funds in or resources as it makes sense. And so Washoe Education Foundation has offered to give us those contacts. They're there to help us publicly message what it means to work together as a foundation. And then I really think that we're at a space where we need to think about our organization moving into a foundational space where we're really recognized as that. Because I think a lot of times that folks don't necessarily, when they think of Education Alliance, they think of Partners in Education first and foremost. And as somebody who came in from the outside, I can see Partners in Education by and large feels like a way to have our really awesome companies get involved. It's corporate stewardship of a lot of things that are going on. And I think that we could do, could increase our impact by diversifying a little bit of how we steward and invite people in. So that's what the next chunk of time I think really looks like for Brittany and I as we're going through this, figuring out like what really works for Partners in Education, which I talked about there, seeing, do we have an ability to diversify some of the support that we get through the chronic absenteeism pieces, because we know that there are people who are really interested in systematic change, and so that might be something that could be really helpful. And then as we continue to sort of share about the work, and you talked about this, the marketing, Kaylin's point was so well heard, as we start to share about how we're making an impact, maybe inviting more individuals in so that they will know, hey, this is a place that I can support teachers and students and educators as we continue to go. So, yeah.
All right. Any other questions? So with that, we will take the vote there. Basically, it sounds like we are just giving a vote to approve the merger or recommend. Is that what it is? Oh, to provide a recommendation. So would we need a motion for someone to just, we recommend the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees to approve the merger?
Yep.
All right. So we'll need that and then a second.
I'll move to approve the merger as described in the packet.
Second.
I'm going to stop you guys there. You're making the recommendation. So the motion is to make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. I'll amend it. I'll move to approve a recommendation for the merger as described in our packet for this evening's meeting.
I'll second that too.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And abstentions? One.
I abstain.
Okay. There we go. Up next, we'll do updates, from our educational institutions featuring the University of Nevada, Reno, including information on the Collegiate Academy Teacher Appreciation Reception, Mental Health Career Open House, and Early College Learner Counseling Summit.
Okay, thank you very much. Last Saturday, or was it the Saturday before, we had our Collegiate Academy Teacher Appreciation Reception at the UNR Joe Crawley Student Union. We had about 10 or 12 faculty come, and Tiffany McMasters was also there, President Sandoval was there, the provost was there. We just wanted to make sure that they were aware that how appreciative we are of all the efforts they've done on behalf of the university and teaching these concurrent enrollment programs. We really feel like it's important for us to have the support of these teachers, especially on such a impactful program, and directing students towards or facilitating their incentivizing their participation in higher education and potentially moving towards degrees, post secondary degrees for themselves. So it was a really nice event. We provided basketball tickets for the teachers and their families to go to we played San Jose State and we actually won, so that was exciting. And then at halftime they called them out, recognized them on the center court. So it was really a nice event. We have a kind of a really exciting event that's coming up in March. We're going to have a mental health career open house, and we're inviting 300 students from Washoe County School District to come to campus. We're going to have people from the med school, the psychiatry department, the College of Science is going to have the psychology department there. We're going to have the School of Public Health. We're going to have the School of Social Work, and the College of Education Early Childhood Development and Counseling programs are going to talk to these students and their teachers about opportunities in careers to support mental health types of activity. We know this is a big priority for the state, and so we figured this is great. We could do anything to promote a workforce to support mental health issues in the state. This will be a huge benefit for us. So we're really excited about that. In 2 weeks, we're going to invite counselors and assistant principals and other administrators from our partnering Collegiate Academy schools, both in Southern Nevada and also in Washoe County School District and the rural school districts where we have partners. And basically the idea is to talk to them about the challenges that they're seeing that their students are facing in the schools as they transition towards higher education. So we're going to have a roundtable with counselors from these high schools, with our counseling office folks, our dean of students, our disability resource folks, and talk about, okay, what are the commonalities and unique issues that are impacting high school students and college students that are in this kind of transition between high school and the university. So we're really excited about that. We're also going to, give them, talk to them about pathways to help facilitate their students from going to college, and not just UNR, but just in general, how to support, what to look for in counseling them about financial aid opportunities. The idea of, going to a community college and doing, and then transitioning to a 4-year. Lots of things that we know impact students. There's multiple pathways to higher education. We would just like to provide them with as much tools as we can. We will also have a panel of students that participated in the Collegiate Academy as concurrent enrollment students and get their point of view of what we're doing and how we might be able to do things better. What else is going on? I think that's about it. There's a lot of interesting things that are coming down the pipe that we hope, I don't know if we could talk about this, so I probably shouldn't talk about that. Anyway, really exciting things I think is going to impact our community and the state in general. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing. It's really great to hear what's happening in the higher ed space as we get that pipeline going, and there's a lot of great collaboration. So,
any questions for Dave? Lauren, I see you're
I have a
eager.
question.
Yeah.
For I think it was a workshop or something you're having that's involving the students for mental health and career counseling and all that. I think that's really interesting. A lot of the young adults that I've been around in the last couple of years talk about that being a career path. So you said it's for 300 or so students. How are they selected? Is there a way they can sign up? Is it more of a, hey, they're already in touch?
Well, okay, so it's all kind of tied to the collegiate academies again. So we are in every high school in Washoe County right now, so except for Reno and Worcester, I think. But so it basically started because the teachers, we're teaching Psych 101 in these schools, and the teachers from the Psych 101 classes said, hey, we want to do this. I think this is a great opportunity for our students. We want them to see what's going on campus and see what kinds of, because the kids are very excited, I think, about that class is getting, wanting to see what's out there. So that's what we're doing right now. So actually, every high school in Washoe County, except for Reno and Worcester, are going to be able to attend. And we don't mean to be exclusive. So maybe I should check into opening those up too, since we're doing that. Thank you.
All right, no more questions. Dave, thank you. It does sound really exciting up at the University of Nevada, Reno. Let's go over to 209. That is an update on the ongoing chronic absenteeism fundraising campaign, impact report, reviewing, updating current bylaws, organizational capacity, such as staffing and communications.
I'll keep this quick because we are closely approaching 6, but I just want to let you know we are going to continue to fundraise for absenteeism and embark in a collaborative campaign, which I think is really great. And I think all of your questions today really will help with this work. And so I just, again, really want to thank you because we'll make sure we sort of front load, I think, some of the work that we're doing with the same questions that you guys had. I'm really hoping to do an impact report. That is just, it's, kind of trying to get the data and get it to a place that we can share out what this organization has made possible. are reviewing our current bylaws, but will not be making any changes to them, especially until we wait until after the merger. So just know we'll continue to bring up like things that we may do, but for right now, that is just stuff that we're just kind of looking at other great examples. And then just capacity. So one of the things that we're trying to do is, as I mentioned, Lindsay Beck has taken a new job, and we're really excited for her, but we are now a party of two. And so with that, we're sort of the strong but mighty micro team, and we're really looking at, as we talk with people, thinking about ways that we maybe can build capacity. So there's a certain amount of investment in modernization, which I have talked about. So looking at getting a communication tool like Constant Contact, or other ways that we can, like a CRM, some things that could make some automation, but also, and I'll bring this back to the board at another time, like right now with how we are formed, we really just don't have that capacity to keep a secretariat full time, and I really like to see us get there. And so I think it's going to take some really specific and targeted asks to be like, hey, would you be willing to invest in this organization? Because with just a little bit more bandwidth and capabilities, we're going to be able to do some really great things. So I just wanted to bring that up to you guys, because I know that you guys, I want to keep you abreast of all the things that are going on. And I want to underscore in this last agenda item, if you ever feel like you don't know, or you've heard something, or you're curious, call me, text me, email me. I will try to get information to you as soon as I can. I really, really appreciate what you guys do at the board for us in the community, and what you're made possible, over this last year.
All right, Sarah, thank you. Is there a plan with Lindsay's position, or how's that looking right now? Too soon to talk?
Well, what we're doing right now is I'm holding back reposting the position for a little bit, because I just really want to look at, what would it take to make the position full-time? Would there be interest, within the donor pool that we have so far? And, kind of just figure out that, as well as Brittany and I are kind of doing the job to help with the onboarding of the next person. So really getting an idea of like, what are the processes? How can we do this so that we bring somebody in, they're feeling like they're coming in a strong foundation, because I think that will help with retention.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, sir, is there any update on the program coordinator for the Redfield?
That position is still also up. So we have a few more candidates who have just applied in the last week. So that's kind of exciting. But if you know anybody who's really passionate about field trips and underserved schools and just wants to work on a great team, it is really a rewarding job, and one that I think is pretty fun. And I can send it to the board again, but that's with the Redfield Outreach Coordinator Program.
All right. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll go on to closing items. Item 301, any public comment at this time?
None at this time.
All right. Announcement of our next meeting. Apologize for the typo, April 21st, 2025, but expect something between now and then. So check your emails, yeah? Okie doke. The time is 5:48. With that, yep, we'll adjourn at 5:48. Thank you, everyone.